So what kind of paper do you use when you coffee dye? Any kind of paper. Copy paper, old book pages, doilies, cardstock. You can use anything. So come with me and we will coffee stain some paper. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm so glad you're here. As you saw from the opening, we are coffee dyeing paper today. And when I was a beginner, my first question was, what kind of paper do you use? And honestly, you can use anything. You can use old book pages, you can use tags, envelopes, doilies, guest checks. I mean, anything paper that you want to dye, you can dye. And here's my regular coffee paper, regular cardstock. You could do tracing paper. You can do die cuts. You can literally coffee stain, coffee dye any type of paper. Just be careful because you are putting paper in a liquid, and the law of, I guess, physics says, that's not going to work. It does work, you just have to watch it. So that was my first question. My second question was, how do I do this? And it's really simple. First, you make some coffee. You can either make a coffee with a Keurig, a coffee pod, if that's all you have, or you can brew up a pot of coffee. You can even do instant. So it's totally up to you what you have on hand and what you use daily. If you don't use coffee at all, I would suggest instant because it's the cheapest and you don't have to buy a machine to make it. Or if you didn't want to do coffee, you can always do tea. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So how do I do this? That was my number one question. So all you do is I brewed up some coffee and I've poured it into my pan. So make sure your pan is the correct size to start with. Make sure your piece of paper will lay flat in the pan so it's totally submerged in the coffee. So here's just my plain sheet of copy paper. I've dropped my paper into my coffee and I'm going to turn it over so I get both sides. And then if you want it dark, you let it sit for a minute. If you want it light, you just dip it and take it out. Totally up to you. When you take it out, you lay it on something, and I have a pan with parchment on it that I'm going to put it on. So after it's been in here a little while, the fibers in the paper start to break down and it weakens, so you need to be very careful. Taking it out, and just let it drain for a minute. Kind of shake it, get the excess off, and I'm going to put it up on parchment paper. I dry mine in the oven, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so that's a plain piece of copy paper. Now with graph paper, when you put it in, some of these lines or all of these lines will fade away. But that's okay because you still get some of them, so you get the feel of graph paper. Same thing with notebook paper. The ink just kind of fades. If you want super dark, leave it in a long time. You can also put in some coffee granules to give it some texture, some depth, because it will leave spots on the paper. Totally up to you. Now I'm going to coffee dye a tag and an envelope, a doily, and I will do a die cut just so you can see. Now, when you do the envelopes, they will come unstuck sometimes. Just, glue them back. Like I said, these are all going to be light because I'm not leaving them very long because I want to be able to give you an example. Half sheet of music paper. And I'll try to let these soak a little longer so you can see the difference. Let's see. As those are soaking, I was going to talk about you can also dye fabric. This is just a piece of cotton muslin. You can dye cheesecloth. You can dye lace. Any type of fabric. This is some vintage trim. You could dye it. Just anything you wanted to, you can do. But you want to do the fabric last because it's going to soak up the coffee. And I do not put my fabric in the oven to dry. I don't want to catch it on fire. Now the next thing is going to be my cheesecloth and my little piece of muslin. These are great for using in mixed media. And I'm going to let them soak for a little bit because I want them to have good color. And then I'm going to put my cheesecloth in, same way. You can also do bedspreads and curtains to give them the vintage look. However, you will have a smell, and that is one thing coffee does when you're dyeing with it, have a smell. Your papers will still have a smell. I know some people add vanilla, cinnamon. I've heard some people add like almond, they add essential oils. But to me, you can still smell the coffee. And honestly, coffee is a trigger for migraines for me. What I do is I stain my paper and then I just let it air outside for a little while. And that really, really helps. So what I'm doing right now is making sure my fabrics are in there and that they're going to have a good stain. Now see, this one is going to be splotchy if I don't get it out and, try to get it all covered. You can have splotchy if that's your goal, Do whatever maybe the project that you're working on calls for. Now I know there's a whole school of crafters that are like, I would never coffee dye and put it in a journal or a scrapbook because it is not acid free. And yes, I totally get that. So I respect that. If this is not your thing, that's fine. But, it's up to you, and everybody has personal preferences. Everybody has their thing, and you know me. Do you, okay? Do you, because it's fine to be different. So, there's my coffee-stained muslin, and I am going to just lay this over my sink because it's not going in the oven with the paper. I just don't want to do that. And there's the cheesecloth. After looking, my papers up here they're going to be light, and I think I want one to be a little darker. So you can always very gently lift it back off the parchment and put it back in the coffee. Just be careful because this paper is super fragile now. While you are staining your papers, if you're going to dry them in the oven, be sure you have your oven on. Oops, and it's up to temperature. I dry my coffee paper on 175, and I dry it on pans. I do not put it on the rack. That's just me. If you want to put your papers directly on your oven rack, go for it. But don't walk away. Don't put these in and go, oh, I'm going to set the timer and go vacuum. Or I'm going to set the timer and go write a blog. Don't do that. Stay and watch these because this is paper and you do have it in your oven. We are back at my stove. Hi. And I have it set on 175. And I'm just going to put my pan with the parchment paper and the coffee stain paper on the top shelf. And it's going to bake. And I'm going to come over behind you and get our 2 pans of our smaller ephemera. I'm going to wipe the excess liquid off. And I'm going to put these on my bottom shelf. Okay, so when I started dyeing coffee paper, it was fine. I needed it. You want that vintagey look, and that's cool. But I also wanted some colors. And I used Kool-Aid, which was great. It smelled good, but I felt kind of bad wasting Kool-Aid. So I thought, what else can I use, and how is it going to work? So I decided to try food colors and color paper and see if it worked. And it actually worked amazing. I can, I have the colors, they're bright, they last a long time, and it's easy to do. But if you do food coloring, definitely wear gloves because it will stain your hands, just like Kool-Aid does. Also, a lot of people do organic. That's more advanced, dyeing with avocado and stuff, and we'll address that in another video. But basics right now, I decided I wanted colored paper, so I use food coloring. And a lot of people were like, how does that work? Does it stay? Are the colors bright? And this is some green that I did 2 years ago, and it's still super vibrant, super pretty. Look at that. I don't know if you can tell, but it's like very green. Try to get it where you can see. It's all very green. It's held its color. It's amazing. I did blue. I used all the blue. I did red. I used all the... Oh, look. Here's a blue. There's the blue. And then the rest is green. I did pink. I mean, it was all just gorgeous. It was easy to do. And so I would highly recommend, if you want colors and you want something simple and easy to do, use food coloring. Now, just a FYI, when you do envelopes or do bags, sometimes their seams will come undone because you're soaking them in water. See, the back seam came undone. What you do is just, glue it back, tape it back, whatever you want to do. But it is an FYI because it does happen. So anyway, so food coloring makes colored paper super easy if you want that handmade, that crinkly sound in your mixed media, your journals, whatever. Food coloring's great, so don't discount it. It's cheap. You get the 4 primary colors and possibilities are endless. If you would like to see a color mixing video for options for your paper, comment down below. I'll be happy to do it. So we're going to go back over and check our paper and see how it's doing and if we need to flip it. It's still very wet, I can tell by looking at it. So we're just going to let it bake until it's dry, because you do want it to be totally dry because that bacterium does grow in moisture, so that's really important. You can set your oven between 175 and 200. I would not go over 200. It's not recommended anywhere to go over 200. So if you're in a hurry, don't do coffee dyeing. This is a process that takes at least, depending on how much paper you want to dye, at least, an hour to 2 hours. Sometimes it can take all day. I know I did a marathon of coffee dyeing, tea dyeing, and food color dyeing one day, and it literally took all day long between the papers dyeing, putting them, putting them on the pans, baking them, taking them out, and doing the process over and over and over. So I would definitely not schedule this if you're like, oh, I have maybe 30, 45 minutes, an hour tops to do this. I would wait. Okay, this one's done. You've got that nice vintage paper sound. It's crinkly. You've got some color on it. I don't know, my kitchen's so bright. I don't know if you can see. So this paper is totally dry now. And this is the one I double soaked. And like I said, it's so dark, bright in here. There you can kind of see how dark it is. Anyway, it's really pretty. And the parchment looks great. And so guys, I hope you enjoyed this coffee dyeing for beginners. I hope it answered some of your questions. If you'd like to see a video where I review coffee stain papers and other dyed papers from Etsy shops, let me know in the comments below and I would be happy to. So be sure and hit that subscribe button and that little bell so you'll know when videos are up. Thank you for being here and have a great day, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.